Julius Caesar. That's the whole video. Thank you for watching. Ciao. You can get back to watching your favorite e-girl's Twitch stream in her bathtub. In all seriousness, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare is his most underrated play. Now, I reckon that it's underrated due to the fact that it's always seen as a political play. And there is a grand political theme to the story, but it is not a play on politics per se. And when it gets staged that way, it leads to a bunch of confusion and pretty much a mild and bland play unless you really enjoy the tale of Julius Caesar's demise. Hwah! Such a fucking moron. I hate living in the city, man. I've been trying to record this video for 4 days. There's constant construction. I can't waste time anymore, so if you hear any noises in the background, I do profoundly apologize. The structure of this play is very simple, and I'll be going through it on an act-by-act basis. Pretty much every educated person is aware of what exactly happened to Julius Caesar some 2,000 years ago, and there's nobody better than myself as a person that's never stepped foot into an educational facility to truly analyze this play. Just to get the gist of it out of the way, some conspirators meet together and kill Caesar, and then all the conspirators die. That's all you need to know. Preliminary remarks nobody cares for. This play was written in 1599. It came at the turn of the century, and it marks a change in Shakespeare's career. He had just come off several historical plays and went into his tragedies. This play was followed by Othello and Macbeth and Hamlet and all this other fucking crap. So naturally you find a mixture of the two as a kind of apex. He ascends up the mountain of history and descends down the mountain of tragedy, melding both at the top. The common tendency for this play, as I said, is to stage it as a political play. They choose whatever authoritarian figure you have at the time and stage that person to be Caesar, and then people conspire around him and kill him, and yay, we got rid of authoritarianism or whatever the fuck. If some liberal art student is aspiring to create a Shakespeare play and sets this one on stage, she would probably choose someone like Donald Trump as the Caesar figure and some fucking guy like Mike Pence to be Brutus. You have three crucial characters in this play. That is Brutus, Cassius, and Mark Antony. Part of what leads so many people to misunderstand this play is the fact that the play is called after Julius Caesar, even though Julius Caesar is not that important to the story. Julius Caesar is only there as an instrument for the carrying out of the central theme, which is nobility and friendship, which is why the true name of the play should be The Tragedy of Brutus. Brutus, of course, is the young man so dear to Caesar's achy breaky heart who betrays him for the greater good. The idea that the play should be called after Brutus first came from Friedrich Nietzsche in his Joyous Science. They call it the gay science sometimes. So evidently I am yet to have a single original idea in my whole life. Nonetheless, the key central focal point of the play is Brutus and the tragedy within him. The tragedy of nobility and its decay, the tragedy of friendship and where your loyalty lies, the tragedy of honor and the enactment of it. When doing a little bit of preliminary research for this video, I happened to stumble upon some study notes for students of English literature primarily in England, and was shocked to see that Brutus is described as a fool. Of course, what happens to Brutus is that he is swayed by the stone-cold killer Cassius to betray his friend Caesar, and thus curb what they perceive to be the threat of dictatorship from Caesar. This is horrendous slander, and this is why I will be homeschooling my children. This kind of approach is indicative of a general problem of our times where we conflate nobility and stupidity. Nobility in the ancient terms often came with a gentle heart, a noble heart. When you say that someone has a noble heart, you usually think that they're charitable and they're willing to give themselves up for the greater good or for some kind of ideal. They're willing to burn themselves out for this in a great way, not in a way that's self-defeating, but in a way that should, in theory, benefit mankind. The noble character that is Brutus and people like him in history are unstained by the sins of our life. It is very difficult for them to understand when someone is lying to them, when someone is manipulating them, because they are of a very gentle and good heart. When describing a kind child, you will never call them stupid for being naive about the world. Even the word naive has a negative connotation, but you generally would not say that this child is stupid. You would say, if only more people had the heart of of this child. The same goes for Brutus, and the same goes for Brutus's ideals. The horrific characters in this play are not all the conspirators that get together to kill Caesar, and it is not Caesar himself, because Caesar himself is a hypothetical situation. We will never know, unfortunately, whether Caesar would ever have become this tyrannical dictator that the conspirators said he would be. We have no way of knowing that. And of course, since the universe has a great sense of humor, what came following the death of Caesar was a period of ultimate authority and ultimate imperialism and all this kind of stuff that people usually assign to the ideas of dictators. The most terrible character in this play is Cassius, and second behind him is Mark Antony. Cassius is motivated by his resentment of Caesar. He is a resentful human being, and he carefully crafts arguments as a stone-cold pragmatist and rationalist and logician to sway the gentle, noble-hearted Brutus over to his side. So let's take a look at that. Act 1 begins precisely with the interaction of Cassius and Brutus, where Cassius approaches Brutus and says, look, they're hailing Caesar outside, and he's about to be crowned king, and all this other fucking, oh no, they're gonna do this nice stuff to Caesar, and I don't get any of it. And he solidifies that with a speech where he says, when we were younger, we jumped in the river, Caesar asked me, this is Cassius speaking, Caesar asked me to jump in the river, and we jumped together, and we swam, and then Caesar was drowning, and I helped him out. And now Caesar is a god, and he wasn't even able to fucking swim, moron. And Brutus is slowly starting already to be swayed by this, because there are previous concerns already in place. Caesar had just defeated Pompey and was returning from this battle, and that's why he was going to be crowned. He was already showing some signs of a more authoritarian and strict regime that would supposedly be coming. The best line in the whole play comes in Act 1, by the way. Fucking goes hard. Cassius from bondage will deliver Cassius. Wow, what fucking resolve. This man stood up, he looked around himself, he said, I'm in fucking bondage here, I feel like a slave, so you know who's gonna deliver me from that? No, it's not gonna be some fucking parliament that I'm voting for, it's not gonna be some fucking other man of power, it's gonna be me. Now that's the Roman grindset. He's a stone-cold killer. Right at the end of Act 1, after Brutus has departed, Cassius is speaking to another conspirator of theirs, Casca. And Casca is begging him to turn Brutus to their side. He recognizes how important Brutus is to this mission, especially since Brutus is already somewhat revered in Roman society. And Cassius says that the work has already been laid, and that out of the 4 parts that make up Brutus, 3 have already been convinced, and only one last one remains. Now, what are these 4 parts, you may be asking? They're never spoken about in the play again, but I will tell you what those 4 parts are according to Roman values. The first part is the appeal to nobility and specifically heritage. Both Cassius and Brutus come from great noble lines of Rome, and of course in Rome you were a citizen of Rome first and a human being after, and what defined you was your family name and your status as a citizen in Rome. He had already appealed to this by saying, you know, look at where the fuck Rome has come from the times of our ancestors. If I'm not wrong, Brutus's family was instrumental to the actual creation of Rome as a state way back then. So to make this appeal would be very correct from Cassius's part to say, you know, we used to be this fucking great nation, make Rome great again, essentially. The second appeal is to justice, or we can also call it fairness. This is done through the story that Cassius told about the river, where he says, you know, how is it just? How is it fair that Caesar was this fucking weakling, and he's also got epilepsy, by the way, and yet he's the ruler and we're just his fucking servants, basically. The third part that he's appealing to is to Brutus's sense of honor. It is of course honorable to respect Rome. It would be an honorable thing to turn the entire city's pleasant view of them backwards and make them evil because they killed the rightful ruler of the land, this beautiful person who's revered and venerated pretty much as a god on land, and to stand up as men, as a group of men, and prevent future potential calamity of dictatorship and yet be ostracized by every single fucking human being and citizen in Rome. These are the first 3 parts that have already been successfully appealed to by Cassius when he's speaking with Brutus in Act 1. So what's the remaining part, you may ask in a fit of panic? The remaining part is an appeal to friendship. You know how your parents say, well, if your friend told you to fucking eat shit of a spoon, would you do it? And if you were young, you'd probably say,
well, you know, if my friends would laugh, I'd probably do it.
Yeah, this is pretty much what he's gonna appeal to. Bands of men together together can do things that they would never do individually just because there is a great sense of friendship permeating their sphere. If you look at any of the most popular conquerors, if you look at any historical movement, any kind of rebellion, at its core, there is a group of people, doesn't have to be men, can be women as well, as you would see in World War II resistance, that form together as a band of friends first, and then they find some ideal to become subservient to. So just from the first act alone, we see two most important things. That Cassius is a stone-cold pragmatist trad who is fueled by anger and resentment in a sense of some form of personal justice, and that Brutus is a noble-hearted, gentle reed swaying in the wind. A thing of beauty that unfortunately will get abused by any of the stone-cold people in the world. In Act 2, we find Brutus in his house and he's wandering about and he can't sleep. And I would like to point out that Brutus throughout the whole play is very kind to his servant. He treats his servants like no other person does in the play. And this is once again indicative of a noble heart that comes from some kind of old aristocracy in an ancient civilization such as Rome or Greece. There is both a human side to these people at the top, but also a severe respect of the traditional hierarchies that got them to the place where they are at the moment. In a society that basically has no hierarchy except the wealthy elite and the rest of us swine herd pig masses underneath, it is very difficult to picture this kind of thing. So all the lads arrive to Brutus's house and he says, okay, you know what, let's do it, let's plan it out. And they plan the whole thing, and then at one point the people in the group start saying, let's swear an oath that we'll go through with it because the consequences will be disastrous. And of course Brutus, the noble one, once again says, guys, we don't need oaths. Now, it's important to understand that oaths were not always seen as something too great because Rome is an inheritor of the Hellenic tradition. You can read about this in Jacob Burckhardt's phenomenal book, Greeks and Greek Civilization. Oaths were commonly broken. You could make an oath today that, no, I will not fuck your wife, I promise I will not fuck your wife, and then tomorrow the guy walks in and you're fucking his wife. And he probably joins in because they're the Greeks. So Rome, having inherited this, of course, oaths were still very important, but Brutus says, we are above oaths. Our cause and our actions will be so noble and so just and done only in the name of this greater good and of the calamity that we're trying to prevent, that we need swear no oaths. Because swearing an oath reduces this whole endeavor to just a group of people doing some kind of act together. This is not just some kind of act together, at least in Brutus's eyes. Of course, nobody else agrees with this. They do say, okay, we won't swear an oath, but it is quite evident that Brutus is the only one who truly sees this as a selfless act for Roman heritage and society. The only other important part to look at in this second act is that Brutus convinces the group not to kill Mark Antony. Mark Antony is Game of Thrones Littlefinger. He will ally himself to whoever he needs to at any time. He perfectly fits in any pocket. He's a one-size-wears-all. And once again, the stone-cold pragmatist of the group, Cassius, says, no, we really should kill him to prevent him allying and using this to his own advantage. This turned out to be true, they should have killed him too, but Brutus allows his nobility to come forward and his sense of gentleness and says, no, this is an act that's limited purely to Caesar. Everything else is secondary, we just need to get rid of the potential tyrant. Whatever consequences befall us, we shall embrace them and live on. Or die. Then we skip over to Caesar's house. He's deliberating whether he should go or not to tomorrow's Senate. There's omens and there's people saying that he's gonna die. His wife had a dream. I'm not gonna get into all this omen stuff, all this symbolism nature. It's quite self-explanatory when you read it, that they see lions and ghosts and that kind of shit. You can understand it by yourself. You are very smart and I'm proud of you. Caesar ends up deciding to go to the Senate tomorrow, and then we enter Act 3. Act 3 is by far the most popular part of the play. It has, of course, the death of Caesar. It then has this fucking quote, oh, and you, Brutus, as well. Caesar looks at Brutus and he's heartbroken. It's very sad if you really ponder on it. In your very last moment to understand that someone you really love also was part of this activity, bringing you down. Very, very sad. If my heart wasn't turned to stone, I could cry. But probably the most popular part is the funeral and the funeral speeches. Of course, after Caesar dies, Mark Antony shows up and he says, guys, why the fuck did you do this? What is going on? There's Caesar's blood everywhere. And Brutus says, guys, let's smear ourselves with the blood to make it really like a tragedy, to make it a huge thing for the masses. So when people report on it, they say they were covered in blood and it was really a gory scene. Let's not make this pretty in any way for the people, because what we have just done is truly atrocious. So the noble-hearted Brutus is constantly very, very aware of how personal his actions were, and that they are not worthy of being spun into some kind of public spectacle of we were the liberators and we liberated all of you fucking plebs. He does not want to do this. Correctly so, once again. In an ideal society, every man would act this way. And Brutus is the one that says, we're gonna hold a proper funeral for Caesar. He was beloved by the people. The people need the biggest funeral we can throw, a beautiful procession, a beautiful ceremony. And then Mark Antony says, let me speak at the funeral. And Cassius once again goes, absolutely fucking not. This would be a huge mistake. He's gonna turn the people against us. And Brutus, of course, lets him speak. I kinda see why any modern syllabus would teach Brutus as a fool. Because he takes every single action that leads to their eventual demise and that worsens them in terms of the pragmatic and the logical things to do in this kind of situation when you're preparing for a coup. But I very much side with Brutus in that the consequences of these actions are completely irrelevant. Shakespeare, being the genius that he is, does a very great thing by writing a certain line into the play from the mouth of Cassius as soon as they kill Caesar. In this act, they will speak on this event in languages that we don't even know yet, and this event will be covered on every stage in the world. It's true, it's been 2000 years, I chose to talk about this to you today. And yet, it's Cassius who said this, it's not Brutus who says it by recognizing how grand it is. For Brutus, it's a self-contained event that, yes, will probably cost them their lives, but that is the price for Rome. Rome is all that matters, the eternity of Rome, the past nobility manifesting itself in a human being as Brutus and the little circle of conspirators, and acting out its justice on someone who is in a way perverting the values of Rome. Whether Caesar was perverting the ancient values of Rome is of course very debatable, and we will never know the final answer. So Cassius says Mark Antony shall not speak. Brutus says no, Mark Antony shall speak, but we have some conditions. Please don't turn the people against us too much. Not even that, he basically says just don't lie. Don't make it a spectacle. This is a funeral revering and venerating a man. Let the people know the truth of what happened, but let's not turn it into a whole fucking ordeal. Let's not light the fucking city on fire. We didn't start the fire. And logically, what happens? Mark Antony, of course, being a master of rhetoric, turns the crowd against the people. Brutus goes up first and he honors the body and he honors the life of Caesar and honors his accomplishments. It says to the people, let's mourn him, but we had to do what we had to do. And all the people in the crowd are agreeing and they're saying, yeah, sounds good, bro. Sounds good. I agree. You do you, my friend. And then Mark Antony comes to speak and he enters hardcore rhetoric mode and sways the crowd. He begins very lightly and kind of keeps easing into it more and more and more until he's just pretty much slandering and convincing the people to fucking turn the city upside down, killing the conspirators, knowing very well at every moment what he's doing. He says these men got together to kill Caesar because he was too ambitious, but I recall Caesar giving out money and stuff to the poor. Is this what you call ambition? And the people are like, yeah, fucking good point. I didn't consider that. And then he pulls out Caesar's will, which from what I understand is doctored and is not the actual will, and he pulls it out and he says, oh guys, I'm not gonna read it. It's too private. And the people are like, let's read it. And Mark Antony is like, oh, you want me to read it? Well, if you want me to, I don't really want to, but he fucking knows what he's doing. And he reads the will and he says, look, Caesar has left all of you money and property and whatever the fuck not. Everything goes to you, the people of Rome. And then the people are fucking crazy. And they start a riot. And they just go killing people. They come across a poet, this guy who shares a name with one of the conspirators. This is comedic relief from Shakespeare. And they just kill him. They just fucking kill him and they're like, well, you're a poet, well, your name is the same and your poetry sucks ass, man. Fucking garbage. And they just kill him. Fuck it. So what does this great scene tell us? That the masses of people generally don't really have their own opinion and they are swayed by the people in power. It is the great man theory of history that only a few people at the top are the ones who are truly moving history and everyone else is just kind of following and lagging behind. Whether Caesar had died or lived does not truly matter for the story. The assassination attempt of course matters, but the point is that these characters at any moment they want can come up to the plebeians, as they're called in the play, the plebs, and say to them whatever they want and convince them to change their mind in a second. When staging this play, some renditions have the funeral speeches addressed to the actual audience in the room and not the audience on the stage. And of course, after watching this play, on your way home with your wife or your mistress, you will probably be discussing which one of the two in the funeral scene was right. And that's precisely the point that Shakespeare is trying to get across, that can be swayed each and any way. At least half of the audience, when watching the play, will first side with Brutus and then see Mark Antony's points and say, well, you know what, I didn't fucking consider that before, you know what, right, and I hope my mistress agrees with me. So the whole city is fucking rioting like BLM in the United States, and we get to Act 4. In Act 4, we see Octavius enter the stage. Octavius would eventually become Augustus, the new leader and the first emperor of Rome. You would know this if you watched HBO's Rome. So there's a new government, there's a new structure within the fucking National Congress or whatever the fuck. Mark Antony is one of the leading people, so is Octavius, the young Octavius, and the surviving conspirators have fled. They're preparing for fucking battle against the forces of Mark Antony and Octavius. The thing of highest importance in this act is the interaction between Brutus and Cassius at the start of the act. They're fighting. They're having a lover's spat, so to speak. There's some disagreement about money being sent and some forces and whatever the fuck, and Cassius says, hey Brutus, you kind of fucked all of this for me and this is all real bad. And Brutus, in what I find to be the pinnacle of the theme of nobility from Shakespeare here, calms Cassius down and they speak, and Cassius is kind of having a little bit of a temper tantrum, which is not normal to his personality. Clearly he has seen the negative consequences of what has happened. He is now banished and whatnot, and he's struggling, he's having this emotional turmoil. He's not this stone cold guy anymore, whereas Brutus stays the same. He knows what he has done, he was prepared, he is still living out his life, he is now living out his expected punishment, so to speak. He is living out the consequences of his actions, and he doesn't mind. He just keeps going, he just keeps on going, he just keeps on fucking doing it. Do it! I'm clinically insane. Cassius turns to Brutus during their argument and he says, you love me not. And Brutus says the most important line in the play for the theme of friendship, I do not like your faults. And this is why I do bring the theme of friendship into the play, because it shows what friendship can be on different sides. Cassius is friends with Brutus due to the situation they find themselves in, i.e. they're the elite of Rome, and he uses him to serve his own purposes, and now he's seeking comfort in him as a friend. As co-conspirators in a crime, they are bound to the same wheels of fate and he wants to find comfort in him. Whereas Brutus truly loves Cassius, he just doesn't like the errors that he makes, and that's what friends are for. Your friends are not there for them to condemn you at your lowest moments and say, you know what, I turn my fucking back on you. Your friends are there to check your faults. Brutus, for example, as a friend to Caesar, checks his fault of being ambitious. You must always remember the noble roots of Brutus. If you look at Plato, he says that societies and nations go through these kinds of cycles where you begin with a tyrant, and then the tyrant breeds an aristocracy, and then the tyrant goes mad, and then the aristocracy becomes corrupted through its material wealth, and it becomes weaker through time. They keep checking and balancing each other in a negative way and undercutting and overcutting each other, and it just disintegrates. And then a corrupt aristocracy gives rise to democratic movements, and then democratic movements decay into anarchy when the will of the people cannot be followed anymore. And the cycle repeats. Anarchy leads again to tyranny from a single tyrant. And the point you find yourself in at this moment with Caesar is between the rise of the aristocracy, its corruption, and the corruption of the tyrant. So there are three simultaneous processes going on at the same time. The aristocracy is high and ruling. It is being corrupted at the same time, because you see someone like Cassius who's already been corrupted and he's turning into a man who seeks to enact justice and enact his own will on the basis of resentment. And you also see Caesar, who many people are arguing is also being corrupted because his power is just becoming unchecked. And Brutus finds himself at this really important point, and he passes through it with an unstained heart and dies. And this is Act 5. Battles happen, whatever the fuck, some peculiar deaths, some normal deaths. some suicides, everyone's fucking dead. The conspirators are dead. But it's important to note that when all the conspirators are dying, they're not saying, oh, you know, he fucked up and now I'm dead. Cassius makes an error in his judgment and thinks that Brutus has been lost, even though Brutus is fighting well, and he commits suicide. But he doesn't say, fuck Brutus, fuck that fucking guy, now I'm dead because of him. He says, you know what, this was great, this was cool, and now I gotta do what I gotta do. It's the same with any character. And when at the end, Mark Antony and Octavius are victorious and they see that all the characters are dead, they don't have anything negative to say. They say that this is a glorious day for Rome, and this is a glorious way to end the cycle of Caesar's life and revenge for him and justice and universal justice and everything else. But we still need to praise the qualities of these men. And we need to honor them, we need to get their bodies back, we need to hold a proper funeral and celebration of their lives. So still, this kind of noble, aristocratic mindset of respect for the game prevails. They're like boxers who hug at the end of a match after they've insulted each other's kids during the press conferences. Conclusion time. I urge you to read the play for yourself. Please do it for me and my health. I will die if you don't read this play. There will be no more videos if you don't read this play. Sorry to put you in that position. And look at it through the lens of nobility and its corruption and the noble-hearted Brutus. As you are reading the play, always remember in your mind, this is the tragedy of Brutus. This is not a tale about Julius Caesar. This is not a tale about politics. This is the tale of Brutus. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Ciao.